very warm welcome to you. Yeah, it's lovely to be able to join you today and for you to come along. We've got some great numbers listening in today. So, yeah, we're going to have an enjoyable hour, I hope, looking at some new things, looking at some things which maybe need a different perspective. So, welcome to the Mod Manager, how to support employer wellbeing across a dynamic workforce. That's the title. I'm Mark Pinchers. I'm head of coaching here at Westfield Health, and today we're joined by a fantastic panel of experts. We've got Vicky and Stephanie and Anouska. So they know quite a lot about themselves, probably more than I do. So I'm going to get them introduce themselves. So hey, Vicky, say hi. Who are you?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Really lovely to be here and be part of the panel. So I'm Vicky Walker. I'm the Director of People for Westfield Health Group. So look after everything with people.
Brilliant. Great. Thanks for joining us, Vicky. Stephanie, say hi, and can you tell us your job role and who you are?
Of course, yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Steph Carey. I'm an Associate Director and UK Wellbeing Lead at a global real estate consultancy called CBRE. So I lead on all things wellbeing related for our UK business, something I'm incredibly passionate about. Yeah, and absolutely delighted to be joining you all today. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Lovely to have you along. And Anouska, hi.
Hi and welcome. Yeah, I'm a principal researcher, so I lead a physical activity wellbeing and public health research group at Sheffield Hallam University. And part of the research we do is around workforce wellbeing and looking at what works for wellbeing and what doesn't, and making sure that interventions and things we put in place actually do what they're supposed to do.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, there's a wealth of experience in there, so we're looking forward to hearing from what you have to say. Before we get underway, just a few housekeeping rules. So the webinar today is being recorded, and you will receive a recording of this shortly after by email. Good news also that this session has been accredited with CPD, so all attendees are going to get a certificate with a 1 hour sort of accreditation for that. So that'll be delivered to you after the webinar as well. We are live, and we've got, I think, about well, I can't remember the actual numbers, but we certainly had 1,700 people registering for this. So we've got quite a few. Someone will remind me in a minute probably how many we've got actually listening in. I can't quite see it on my screen at the moment, but yeah, bear with us, fingers crossed. We've got a big group. I'm pretty sure we're 500. That's fantastic. So yeah, welcome all you 500 from wherever you're listening in from. So an advantage of joining live is that you can actually put in questions to the panel as you're going along, and we'll do that. We're going to look out for those as well. So please let us know if there's anything that you need anything answering, if you'd like to make some comments, etc., and how this is relevant to your needs within your respective organisations. Then do talk live, which is fantastic. It's the advantage of doing it this way. We've got a lot of great resources as well as far as the session is concerned today that relate to this. So we'll make those available. So please do download those after the event. We're also going to spend a little bit of time looking at your reactions live as well. So you'll see a couple of poll questions coming up periodically. So do have a go at it. We'd love to hear your feedback and find out what you're thinking and what you're experiencing in your own unique work situation. So do let us know as we're going along through those polls, and we'll get the audience, the panelists, to have a chat about those as well. I'm sure there'll be some interesting patterns that we can look at there. A survey is going to appear on the screen at the end of the webinar as well. So it'd be great to get your feedback from this. We host quite a lot of these sessions, and we're always looking to develop and to grow and to move things onwards and upwards. So your feedback is essential, and with a lot of people listening in today, I'm sure we'll have a lot of very valid and constructive information that we can use for future sessions as well. So look, today's discussion is all about the manager in what actually is a very dynamic workforce, and we use that title particularly in the sort of the little strapline dynamic. What do we mean by that? Well, look, I don't have to tell you this. It's changing. It's changing all the time. There's movement that is happening within a workforce, which is unprecedented for us in reality. We've all experienced something at various paces in terms of change. And does it make you feel easy? Does it make you feel excited? It's going to be a range of emotions and feelings and practical applications of this change. What does it mean in terms of well-being? Well, we're going to have a look at that today specifically. We know that the manager's role has evolved drastically in the last few years, and there's certain things that are happening. There's certain patterns that are happening, and we're going to sort of hone in on those a little bit more. But just an interesting bit of feedback, to sort of set the scene. A Gallup poll suggested that managers are looking at certain things that seem to be common across the board. 64%, for example, are saying that now one of the changes that we're experiencing are additional job responsibilities. We all had a job spec, and we're doing that, but there's other things as well. A lot of people saying these extras. What are those extra things, and what sort of pressures is that creating on us? About half the people that are polled as well cited restructuring, changes in the way that our organisations are organised and structured. And does that create pressures? Well, I'm sure it will do. And then another interesting statistic suggests that we're doing all this with less money. We're expected to do more with less, and pretty often faster. 42% of people are reporting budget cuts. So all these changes, yeah, they cost something. How's that going to happen, in our organisations where we know that, the money is important to make it work? Is it actually hindering? Is it helping? I'm pretty sure it's creating more pressure, isn't it? Look, these figures alone reflect major changes to the manager's role within business, but there are other new demands as well. There's lots of other things that are happening. I'm sure we'll hear some of those, and we'll be interested to find out, what some of those changes and impacts are from you as well during the polls. What impacts have these other changes actually had? How they led to an increased demand for wellbeing support. We're a wellbeing based company, and we're pretty interested in the impact on the human element here. So yeah, there are changes to spreadsheets, but they're humans. Organizations are made up of humans. So today our panel are going to be exploring this topic and providing with some practical advice on how managers can navigate this change, provide some meaningful support for their own teams, and particularly in relation to our well-being. We'll hope you're going to learn today and take away from it how the manager's role has changed. We'll be looking into that from our team of experts. The impact of change, particularly on employee well-being, how to guide teams. We want to give some practical tips and things that we can draw from other people's experiences about how we can move forward and share good experience and good practice. Some very practical advice in that respect of the types of things that we can share, and that's one of the benefits of having a forum such as this. So look, what about the manager's role? How has it changed? We've mentioned new demands on employees to be more flexible. We've seen, perhaps some of the things that we've all experienced now with impact on our well-being, particularly in relation to things like mental health. It's providing a catalyst for all sorts of changes as far as the manager's role is concerned, and the modern manager now is one that probably does a lot of very different things than maybe 10, even 5 years ago. Okay, we've all been exposed to so much change and uncertainty, the pandemic. The big one, what impact here perhaps when we're looking at something like artificial intelligence, AI, what impact is that having? Is it creating pressures? Yeah. We're told that it's going to help us and make our jobs easier, but it's creating pressure, and it's the changes which those pressures actually are manifesting in terms of our emotional health and our overall well-being. So let's get the panel involved, as soon as we can. How have these changes shaped employee expectations, do you think, and led to an increased focus on employee well-being? So Vicky, can you start us off on your perspective on this?
Yeah, no worries. I think, Mark, going back to your point around, change creating uncertainty, it certainly does, because any change, whether it's positive or negative, can create that sense of uncertainty and what's people are wondering what's going to happen, how's it going to feel, and I think that's then where the stress comes from, because it's this sort of lack of control, wondering what's going to come next. People aren't comfortable. People, even if they like change, often I think they're asking those questions of themselves. Well, what's it going to mean for me? How is it going to affect me if the organisation is going to change, or the expectations on me are going to change? I do think employees, I know obviously you mentioned then obviously the pandemic before, I think employers are putting health at the forefront of their decisions now, and I think the health and well-being of ourselves is more magnified now, more than ever ever it has been before within the workplace. Expectations on employers and employees are getting bigger and bigger. And I think health and wellbeing during periods of change, it's important not to lose sight of that. Steph, I don't know if you've got anything in terms of CBRE and your point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So I completely agree. I think wellbeing is absolutely now more openly discussed than it ever has been before. And during the pandemic, it really paved the way for a lot more open conversation around this topic. And I think in doing that, people now expect it. There's an expectation from both employers and employees that we do provide this further support, and perhaps that wasn't the case previously. I think something that we've done here at CBRE, which has been incredibly powerful, is really thinking about how do we continue that conversation. So we actually launched a campaign earlier this year called This Is Me. And it's a fantastic campaign. It very much provides a platform for our colleagues to share very personal stories about various wellbeing topics. So we've had things such as mental health being a very big one that we did during Mental Health Awareness Week. We've had people share their stories about living with cancer. Sobriety was another key topic that people wanted to find out a bit more about. So we had some executive directors share their experience of that, and right the way through to suicide prevention as well. So, very vulnerable, very poignant topics. And I think by launching this campaign and showing, I suppose, the care that we have around these topics for our employees, it's had a really lovely ripple effect throughout the rest of the organisation. So what I'm seeing now is people are being more open. They're being really curious about these topics, and I know it sounds a bit cliche, but they absolutely are able to bring their whole self to work because it's a safe environment from which to do so. So the campaign's going to continue on. We're going to have many more topics covered, but that's something that I think has been a really key part of this journey for us at CBRE. Anouska, I'll hand over to you now because I'm sure you've got some great thoughts on this too.
Yeah, thanks, Steph, and that's really interesting and some great things that are going on. And there is that increased recognition that's backed up by the research of how important that role of the line manager is in that employee wellbeing. It kind of provide that permission to prioritise your personal health and wellbeing, helping employees feel that it's kind of okay to do so, and that's all right, and they shouldn't try and squeeze in their own health and wellbeing without their employee knowing. The line manager is giving that permission for them to do that and recognises the importance of it. Employee wellbeing is increasingly being recognised by a lot of businesses as correlating closely with performance and being really important not only to the individual but also the business, leading to more organisations recognising this and recognising that important role that line managers play. And there's recent experimental evidence from the London School of Economics suggesting that the meaningful increase in wellbeing yields an average of an increase in productivity of around 10%. So it's something that businesses really can't ignore. Wellbeing is important to the individual, but it's also important to the economy and the business as well.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there was a time when we thought, well-being was a nice to have, wasn't it? But now that we can measure it in terms of productivity, it makes a lot of sense to look at it now. And it's mushroomed, isn't it? It's just got so much bigger when it comes to if you like, placing well-being more centrally in everything that we do. And there's a win-win here. It's good for us as employees. It's good for the organisation. And of course, it's going to be good for our customers as well if we've got a happy and healthy workforce. So look, changes, might present unique challenges to specific organisations. Organisations have similar patterns in the way we do things, but there's a uniqueness as well. And we're very interested to hear from our audience now as to the sort of challenges that might be unique to them. So you see on the screen in a moment a little poll that comes up sort of saying, well, look, what are the things that are impacting mainly on you with regard to the wellbeing challenges that are happening at the moment? So have a go at that. I'll let you answer those. The answers are coming in as we speak, and you'll see those on the screen. So let that run for a moment, and hopefully we'll be able to see some patterns evolving that we can have a chat about as well.
I think looking at the scores coming through, Mark, it's not surprising that heavy workload is showing. I think, fundamental basics around how to support wellbeing. First and foremost, you've got to see what people have got on their stack, haven't you? And it's clearly that, it becomes, it's either time or workload, isn't it? So I think, it's not surprising that 50% of our audience are saying that it's the workload.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the problem there is there's 24 hours in a day, of course, and what we do is we traditionally throw more hours at those heavier workloads. It puts more pressure on, and of course, the longer hours we work, then the less we're going to be able to change the outcomes in many respects from a point of view of us being on half steam and feeling stressed and pressured. So we're working longer hours but less effective. So how can we work smarter? How can we work more efficiently? Those heavier workloads are quite significant. I don't know, any other views there on from the panel with regard to those patterns and what you're experiencing from your perspective? Steph?
I think
Sorry.
I was going to say, I think the workload piece is tricky because we don't have a magic wand. We can't just magic that away. And to your point at the start, Mark, everyone is expected to do more with less. So it's just really trying to think about that resilience piece and how you can build that personal resilience in order to manage that, which is hard. It takes effort, and it can be quite painful points to go through, but it's just recognizing it, and we'll go on to talk about this a little bit later in terms of your role as a manager within that, but it's I think we're seeing this across multiple industries at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Anouska, any views on that as well from your perspective and an academic view?
Yeah, I think it's just the recognition that in this country particularly, we tend to think that working longer hours means getting more work done. And research generally doesn't show that. It's working smarter, working more efficiently. And as you say, having a well workforce, actually working shorter hours can mean getting more work done if that workforce is being productive with that time that they're in. So it's getting the other things right can really help with that rather than just longer hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our emphasis has been very much on looking at, and a concept that I sort of looked at for a few years now as being quite a good focus from a change point of view when it comes to how we measure our effectiveness within the workplace, is to measure our energy level while we're actually doing it. And we quite often find that, we try to manage time and throw more hours at something, but should we be trying to manage our energy and understanding the ebbs and flows of when our energy is saying do certain things and, rest and recover at other times? The bottom line is that we can actually be more productive if we manage our energy effectively by working smarter. And technology should be there to help us work smarter rather than throw longer hours at things. So isn't that interesting? It's workload is greater. Are we fully utilising the means that we've got available to us to work smart? Interesting. The cost, is there from our wellbeing point of view if we're just throwing more hours. So, okay, so change is often thought of as something that's negative within a working environment, and bringing about feelings of uncertainty for employees, as we said. We know that there will be a negative effect on wellbeing specifically. And it's interesting that if we look again at some statistics, just to get a rough idea of patterns developing here, McKinsey & Co. actually suggested that 70% of organisational change efforts actually fail. So we need to address something, and we need to change something. We know that there's something that needs to be addressed. But why is it that so much of that effort is actually going in a way that doesn't necessarily create the desired effect? The things that are probably being cited here are actually lack of management support for that change, and also as a result the buy-in with employees. We think of change as something that's going to take us away from our pattern, a familiar pattern of familiarity. We always do it this way. I feel comfortable when I'm going to do it this way, and the pattern sort of becomes that I can assign it to another part of the brain to sort of, take over and do it without even thinking too much. And that feels quite pleasant. And all of a sudden someone comes along and says, do it in a different way. No wonder there's going to be less employee buy-in if we're being taken away from our patterns, our normal patterns of familiarity. We can become prisoners of familiarity, of course, and it's about pacing that. So whether it's a change in a structure or a new way of working, why can employees be resistant to it? How can change impact on their well-being from that resistance point of view? Are we trying to stick to our guns and stick to doing things in the familiar way? Or should we be open to new and different ways of doing things? So let's put that to the panel for a moment. Anouska, what is your view on sort of that pattern and the structure? Any views on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, as you said, change, we always like the familiar. Most people like to stay where they feel comfortable. And changing away from our normal routines and behaviours can be quite hard and can be quite challenging for a lot of people. And it involves gaining a better understanding of those barriers and facilitators to change for those individuals, and realising that they may be different for different people within your organisation. And that might be due to different age groups, cultural backgrounds, work patterns, whatever that might be, but recognising people as individuals, and so that employees can be effectively supported through that change. So in order to bring about effective change, we need to consider how we change people's behaviour in line with what we're going to be doing. So we can take some important learning to support this from the behaviour change literature. So I'm sure some of you are aware of the COM-B model, which you can see on the screen there. And it recognises that people need to have a capability, opportunity and motivation to change and for change to happen. So in its simple form, it focuses on those three things in the middle, the capability, opportunity and motivation to support behaviour change. And the full wheel that you can see there gives more detail on the interventions in that darker grey ring and the policy categories that can also help design a plan for change. So if you're putting together a change plan, there are different things that you could consider to support that change and help that change to be effective.
Absolutely.
Vicky, so Vicky, have you got anything else to add there?
Yeah, I think to turn that that model into a real practical terms around change, I think whenever a change is put into effect from an organisation, it often comes from the top, doesn't it? And I think getting that right at the very start is so important. So if it's come from a really confident and secure place, then I think that helps to encourage people to understand the change and why it's happening. I think if you see leadership within your teams and in your organisations that aren't quite confident about the upcoming changes and they're worried themselves, then I think then that obviously filters down into the organisation. So I think it's how is it communicated right from the very top, that piece of change, whether it's a structure change, whether it's a change of processes, because then colleagues will feel more comfortable because they will buy into what their leader's saying, hopefully. So I think it's making sure that they're doing it from a really confident and secure place. I think it's okay to acknowledge that it creates fear and uncertainty in an organisation at times. I think sometimes organisations go about their change and they try and go positive, and then ignore the fact that actually there are feelings out there. There are feelings of fear and anxiety and a bit of insecurity, and actually acknowledge those feelings and show empathy and take time to understand them. So I think rather than going on this is the way we're going to do it and this is a positive change and everyone will believe that, I think acknowledge that some people will be on a different journey along that change curve and some people will be championing it and be really positive, but then you'll have other people in your organisation that will be a little bit scared and will be a bit have some anxiety. So I think don't ignore the feelings out there and acknowledge that we know it can create difficulty for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, brilliant points there. And I think, ultimately it could be detrimental if businesses don't change. So, we really need to think about embracing it and the individuals within that organisation as well. Change is the only constant, as they say. So, we know it's inevitable. Change is always coming. And I think it's also about really spotting the positives in that change. And employees' mental health can actually be really positively impacted by it. If I think about some examples where we've seen change in our business, people have, yes, they've perhaps struggled through it at times, but ultimately it's led to really greater resilience. Like, they've really built their skills, they developed their skills, they've learnt new ones, and actually through going through that period of change, there's been space for more creativity, more innovation, and I think when people recognise that the good can come through the change, and trying to focus on that to help them through the difficult times, that can be really, really powerful as well.
Absolutely. No, indeed. Well, looking at it, two things just to draw out from that. Everyone's mentioned that the feelings you talked about, particularly, Vicky, don't ignore the feelings. Emotional intelligence has become such a central part now of what we're doing within the management and leadership role. And it's interesting, isn't it, that EQ, our emotional quotient, which can be measured, is supposedly 4 times better predictor of performance, team performance, and effectiveness in the workplace than IQ. Isn't that interesting? So it shows the importance of doing something and tapping into something which is really very central to us and has been for thousands of generations. Our feelings, how we feel about things, actually is a deeper dive into the connectedness that we actually have, in our social situations, but particularly in the work environment as well. So we can't ignore those feelings. But absolutely, the process of involving people with that change and the things that positively impact on change, it is a stimulus for growth. And the idea here is that, the organization will grow. Of course it will, if we adopt new methods and embrace new ways of doing things. We grow as individuals as well, and resilience is a key area. It sets us up for more positive growth in the future. So no, thank you for that, team. Yeah. Okay, so we know that change can't be avoided, but then again, why would we want to avoid it if it's a stimulus? Yesterday's best becomes today's average, and tomorrow's mediocrity. The idea is that if we don't change and embrace that, then the danger is that we sort of fall behind the wave of change, don't we? We want to be riding it in many respects. So how do we manage our teams through the change? What are the sort of things that we need to do? Quite interested in finding this out, really from everybody. But Vicky, do you want to start the ball rolling when it comes to the practicality of how we manage our team through change?
Yeah, I think there's two things for me. So, managers are pivotal around, enforcing change and taking teams through change. But remember, managers are people too. So they'll have their own feelings, they'll have their own nervousness and anxiety too. So I think making sure that they have that support as well as when they're trying to support their team through a change. But I think, we are born as human beings with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And the reason we have 2 ears is because we really need to listen and communicate. So I think thinking around how we communicate the change right from the top, how we listen to people's, whether it's anxieties about that forthcoming change, what it is that they want, what is it they prefer in the old way of doing things versus the new way. Giving them an opportunity to be curious about the changes that are coming will help people buy into the ideas. And I think making sure that empathy is shown towards employees. So our Westfield Health Workplace Wellbeing Survey found that the most important qualities for a manager, as rated by employees, are compassion and understanding and the ability to talk. And that absolutely rings true when we're talking about time during periods of change. So it's really important that we give people the opportunity to talk about it and don't expect people to change overnight or adopt new processes. And I think patience is key. So I think it's really important that managers are patient and understanding that they'll know their teams better because they'll communicate with them every day. But some people within their team may be really quick to adapt to the new ways of working if it's that, and some people may be a little bit slower. So I think patience is an absolute key to that. I don't know if there's any sort of research or science behind that, Anouska, that you can help, with that opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky, and fully agree with what you're saying. Communication is so important for both sides, up and down, in terms of having that good working culture and supporting change. And there is an important research paper by Phillips and Klein that was last year, so 2023, and they collated all the strategies that both change managers use, but also that appear in the literature for change management frameworks. And they collated those and looked at what the key findings were in terms of what works, what's recommended, and what the most effective things are. And it's not surprising that good two-way communication comes up high on that list of things that people do, both in the real world and also that recommend in the literature backed up by evidence. And it's crucial. And ideally, when change happens, that kind of co-designing, co-producing that change plan with employees and managers so that they all feel part of it and engaged with it. And that leads to that increased motivation and commitment to the change and feeling like they fully understand what's going on and they're involved with it and have been part of that. Ensuring that the change vision aligns with the company mission as well, so you can really see why you're doing it and why it's really important. Meeting the employee and managers' training needs, so if there are additional needs required, helping them to feel comfortable and capable of doing and making that change, and considering any change to policy and environment that'll help make that change easier. We all know for any change, whether it be in a business or it be our own personal lifestyle behaviours, as humans we tend to go to the easy options. So if there's policies and environments around us that help us to go in the direction that we need to, then that's also really important. Steph, have you got any examples you can add to that or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I talk quite a lot about with our management and leadership team is really encouraging your team to have that growth mindset and not the fixed one. I know we kind of talk a lot about this and embracing that change and having that growth mindset is really key to making that a success. So it's really about, as a manager, helping your team to spot those opportunities and actually feel really secure in embracing it. So to Vicky's point earlier, it can bring around a lot of anxiety and people, are uncertain. So if you can create a space that feels safe and secure to embrace it, then I think that's a really positive thing. But also to the point earlier, sort of change can be it can be very emotive, and everybody does change, deal with change at a very different pace. So the change curve, absolutely, people move through that at different stages. Not everyone is going to be at the same point that you are. So I think just to be aware of that and thinking about that communication, bring direct reports into the change as early as possible, get their thoughts on it, actively seek their input and their feedback. That ultimately will help you manage the change better, make sure that it lands well. But I think as a manager, you just have to be prepared then to adjust your strategy. And if you do need to kind of shift things slightly, you're not just kind of going straight down the line with what your plan was, but really adapt it. I think that's really, brings much more cohesion with your team, and ultimately, hopefully brings it to a better outcome overall.
Yeah, absolutely. No, involve people as soon as possible. I think it was Cotter did a lot of work on change a few years ago with his 8-step plan, and the second part of it was, develop a guiding coalition of people across the organisation who can contribute to that change. If we've got a change department sitting in some part of the building who say, well, we'll impose this change without any feedback or connection with other parts of the organisation, and that's we'll do it this way. Imposed change is going to be hard to buy and involve people as soon as possible. And all of a sudden, you never know, we might get some pretty good ideas how it affects people, and it might direct that change sort of into something that is a higher level of buy-in, I suppose, in a way. It's get the buy-in as soon as possible, isn't it? So interesting. Again, we're talking about, safety to do it. You've mentioned it a few times, psychological safety in our environment where people can communicate without fear of judgment or even ridicule is important, because sometimes we can say something, but we know it's falling on deaf ears. If we genuinely listen, we have a degree of genuineness and authenticity to the way that we listen to our teams, then they're going to be willing to give you more ideas, and it's a much better two-way communication process that has a higher percentage chance of working. Okay, thanks, team, for that. Got a little question for you now. I don't know if anyone wants to pick it up. Had a question from the listeners. How can we manage people that put their negative feelings about change onto other staff while still being empathetic to them? Isn't that an interesting one? A lot of people want to communicate, but yeah, they do impose their negative feelings about change onto others. How can we manage them, and how can we still be empathetic to them? I don't know, any ideas from the team what you might do there in your situations?
I think I would have that conversation. So I think I'd just have an adult to adult conversation with that person, and maybe they're not even aware that they're sort of sharing their negativity. So I think I would just have a really open conversation and talk to them about how difficult you understand it is for them, but actually how they're feeling about that change, how that's then impacting other people. So that's what I would do. I don't know if Anouska or Steph would say anything else, but that's what I would advise.
Yeah, I'd just add that find out where that negative position's coming from. So yes, you've got the issue that they're imparting those feelings to others, but actually if you can understand their mindset a little bit better and support them to start feeling positive, that person that's obviously quite happy to spread things can also spread positive messages too. So really listen to that listening skills, and listen to that individual about what their concerns are, and have that open communication to try and better understand that, because actually you might be able to turn that into a positive as well.
Absolutely. That's where we sit down, we have crucial conversations, we listen, we understand the feelings that are going on there, and we're in a much better position, to be able to move forward together with agreement and a win-win. Managers are uniquely positioned to know the specific needs of their team, their career goals and aspirations, and also their work-life situation, so we need to have that conversation, don't we? It's interesting that according to the Workforce Institute, employees feel their manager has a higher impact, interestingly, on their mental health than even doctors or therapists. Isn't that interesting? So, the same impact as perhaps even partners or a spouse might have. So we have a huge influence, and we have a huge part to play within our organisation and within our managerial and leadership roles. And, that's pretty significant, and we can't ignore that. So, at the end of the day, it's about balancing in, isn't it? We know that managers have targets. We are measuring performance. We are there to manage a process, and the bottom line is important here. And I think it's about finding balance, isn't it, between maintaining the employee well-being and the performance. And that goes with the job. It goes with the territory, and it's not insurmountable. It's not a task which is impossible. It's just a new facet that actually, when we think about it, there are ways around it, and we increase our understanding by communicating and opening up, and it becomes that win-win situation, doesn't it? Okay, so let's move on. Let's have a look at advice and ability to support teams. We'll take it a stage deeper. Steph, what advice do you have for managers to support their own and their team's well-being? What specific things from your experience then can you share with us?
So I think first and foremost, it's really important for managers to check in with their own well-being first. You cannot pour from an empty cup, as they say. So if you're a manager, I'd really recommend that you take some time for self-reflection, really gauge how you're feeling. So check in with yourself. Understand what your own stress triggers are, recognizing what those are so that you can watch out for them, and really just take some time for your own wellness. That's really important to do that first. Once you have done that, I think it's all about connection. So connect with your employees more, have those regular meetings, and then actually during your one-to-ones, set some time aside, some specific time to focus on a wellbeing conversation. So often in one-to-ones and catch-ups, it's very operational. You're kind of talking about the day job, but you're not really getting under the skin of what's going on for that individual. So I think that's really important and really leads on with that open and honest communication that we were speaking about earlier. And I think the other thing is really about building connection. So yes, you've got your team and that's great, they've got each other, but think about the broader business and the connections that they could maybe make with that that broader business. So, for example, we've got a number of employee business resource groups. I know a lot of companies have these as well, and they're fantastic. So, to name a few of ours, we've got the Women's Network, the Proud Network, our Race, Ethnicity and Cultural Heritage. We've got our Ability Network, our Faith Network, many more. So I won't go through them all now, but they're a really good place for people to go to connect with others that have very similar lived experiences to what they have, and actually having that affiliation can mean a lot. So you kind of build that network outside of your direct manager and your team. So encouraging your teams to go and seek out these connections elsewhere is what I'd recommend. And ultimately, social connectedness can really boost your well-being. So just impressing that on the team so that they know it's an important thing to do. I think Vicky, you had some amazing thoughts on this as well when we chatted about it. But what would you like to share on this?
I think going back to yours, pouring from an empty cup, I often use the analogy that you use if you get on an aeroplane and you have to fit your own gas mask before you fit that of others. I think it's exactly the same with managers. So, as Steph said, making sure that you are in a place where you can role model behaviours, because people, behaviour breeds behaviour. So people will see what you are doing as a manager, and if they will see that you are your schedule's so busy you can't take a lunch break, they will see that and think that that's okay to do that. So I think you've really got to sort of role model your own well-being, as you said, Steph. And I think, as you said earlier about listening and connecting around what employees are wanting, I think about what's important for one person's well-being isn't important for somebody else's well-being. So if you force things like, we should all do walking meetings, that might not be important for somebody else's well-being. So I think really understand what individuals' well-being means to them and what it is they want. So seek that feedback, have those conversations, as you said, Steph. We use like an employee survey, and that feeds into a wider wellbeing strategy. So it's then giving people options to say things if they didn't want to say them to their manager as well around what's important to them for their wellbeing. I think really think about sort of one size doesn't fit all, and think about how you can tailor it to your people. And I'm assuming, Anouska, there's definitely some research out there that helps back up our opinions that Steph and I have shared.
Yeah, I think Vicky and Steph, I'm only going to kind of reiterate what you've already said, really. And we've heard how crucial the managers are to employee well-being, but we also know it's really, really important that managers receive that adequate training to be able to support that. They need to feel confident in that role. For some managers, it's not been something they've been used to. It's an additional thing that's being brought in to do. And making sure that they feel supported and able, like you were saying, that they want to feel ready. We need to look after the manager first as well, so that they feel confident to hold those effective conversations with people, because that doesn't come naturally to everybody, and it can be a skill. Being an empathetic listener, etc., skills that you can learn. You shouldn't feel that I either am one or I'm not. You can learn those skills, and those kind of training courses are really, really important to make sure if managers feel they need them, they've got access to them. And a couple of key things really that a manager can do to support wellbeing, which I think just really support what Vicky and Steph have been saying, is learn to effectively listen to employees' needs, and that leading by example to ensure that employees feel that they have the permission to look after their own health and wellbeing, and that their health and wellbeing is valued by the organisation, that the organisation feel it's important. So an example of this could be as simple as, the boss using flexible working to exercise, or ensuring that emails aren't sent out of hours. You can write them out of hours, but set them to send within normal office hours. Just things like that. Listening to employees, different businesses are different, but there are plenty of examples of ways that you can lead by example to show that you value your employee wellbeing, and you're leading by example in that.
Absolutely.
I think sorry, I was just going to say, I think that leaving loudly is important too. So when people do it, we try and encourage our senior leaders to do that quite loudly, to say, I'm leaving early because I'm going to sports day, or I've got. So it's actually it's emphasised in terms of that visibility of doing those things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you know that leads on quite nicely to a question that we've had in. So this is one that's come in from the audience for you, Steph. You mentioned This Is Me campaign earlier on, and how did you go about encouraging or creating that safety for senior managers to share their personal experiences?
Oh, so I mean, I could talk about this all day, but I'll try and keep this short. My first port of call was my mental health first aiders. So we have a number of people across our business that are trained mental health first aiders. I have a really good relationship with them. I manage, monthly calls with them, and actually, just by having an open dialogue myself, knowing some of the struggles that they've had, and creating this safe platform for them to share, it snowballed. If I'm honest, I had 2 people say they would do it, and then when I shared that with others, more people got involved. So we've got now 7 people that have spoken about their mental health specifically, anything from depression, anxiety, bipolar, PTSD, Globus, eating disorders, like a whole host of things. And I think really it was just building that platform that was safe, like that psychological safety that you mentioned earlier, Mark, and recognizing the importance of being open, being true to yourself, and having senior leaders truly believe that, and come to the forefront with their stories. That's been really, really pivotal, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Okay, well, we've got lots of questions coming in. I'm conscious of time at the moment, but have we got any more questions that we can address now? Let's have a look. Yeah, so a question that's just come in: how do I get buy-in from senior leaders to support the well-being interventions? In our company, there are some older generation managers who aren't used to talking about mental health. That's an interesting one, isn't it? I don't know. Any ideas there on how we can answer that one? How do we get buy-in from senior leaders to support the wellbeing interventions, particularly if the older generation managers? We be careful here. The older generation managers who aren't used to talking about their mental health, which is fair enough. We didn't do that once, did we? I don't know. Any thoughts?
I think just quickly on that one. So I've linked a lot of this to performance, if I'm honest. So a lot of the older generation that we have in our business, I think, they come from a very different working environment to what we're seeing now. So if you've got, your baby boomers and your Gen X coming through, it's or Gen Z, sorry, it's very different. So I think by getting in the piece around performance, getting them to recognise the importance of well-being, how much it is wanted and needed now. It's an expectation of the younger generation coming through. It's not just a nice to have anymore. That's been really, really crucial, but also speaking about well-being topics that are important to them. So for example, we do quite a lot around prostate cancer, for example, and that has really engaged with a different audience that otherwise would have just kind of pushed wellbeing to one side. Sorry, I think I overspoke. Vicky, when you go and answer the question too.
I was just going to say, I think as well, remember those, those senior leaders, whether they're from an older generation or not, will feel this anxiety of change. So they will think, oh, what's well-being? Oh, what do I talk about? So recognising their feelings in this process too, and being open and having those conversations with them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. Thank you. Okay, have we got any more questions? So have we got time for another one from the audience, I wonder? Okay, here we go. When implementing a change, and you are confident the first engagement's going to be met with are you confident, sorry, that you're I'll start that again. When implementing a change and you are confident the first engagement is going to be met with genuine but not constructive negative feedback, how do you approach this? I'm going to read that again because I didn't quite understand. You probably understood the question better than I did if anyone listened. Did I make sense with that one? I'm just reading it again. When implementing a change and you are confident the first engagement is going to be met with genuine but not constructive negative feedback, how do you approach this?
I would suggest that the kind of groundwork perhaps needs to be done before that. If you think it's going to be negative, actually, have you had those conversations to start with around the change, around the barriers and to that change, I think that perhaps would need to be done first before that meeting. I would say there needs to be more groundwork done prior to that.
Absolutely. Okay.
And perhaps
Any other thoughts?
preempting what those thoughts could be. So perhaps, you know, having a consideration of what they could be, so that you've got that groundwork, you've got the kind of answers to the questions that people might have, so you can try and turn it from negative to positive. I think that's quite important too.
Absolutely. Okay. We'll try and answer another couple of questions. Maybe this is the final one. This is an interesting one, isn't it? You know, what happens if you're an SME, a small medium size enterprise, who's haven't necessarily got the networks that we've been talking about? What do we do then if we're a smaller organisation without those sort of support networks? How do we go about incorporating well-being and doing all the sort of things that we've been talking about now? Is it just as applicable with an SME?
I think it's definitely as applicable, Mark. I think there's lots of other ways you can do it without creating lots of the networks, and they're great when your organisation's larger. But I think, you know, people will find support network with just one another. You know, they'll find some common ground, whether it's you know women and menopause group, and they'll support each other. So I think it's just so important to still encourage those support networks with each other. If there's only 6 people in the organisation, they'll be able to support each other in terms of sharing what's important to them from a well-being point of view.
Absolutely. I mean, it's lovely if we've got the support network, you say, but at the end of the day, a smaller organisation has so many advantages when it comes to the closeness and the connections that are more visible. You know, maybe there are huge advantages by being smaller here, isn't it? Yeah, we can still perform the same processes within our managerial role. Alrighty, look, let's do a quick fire round before we finish. One thing from each of you would be very interesting to hear, that is a practical takeaway from what we've talked about today. One thing that somebody can take away and say we can act on that quite quickly. A quick fire one with regard to well-being and the new role, the changing role of the modern manager. Let's go to you, Vicky. Have you got a quick fire takeaway?
Yeah, I think quickfire change is inevitable. It's going to happen, whether we like it or not in some reasons, but it's how leaders and managers support our people through that change that's so important, and listen.
Sure. And listen, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Steph, one for you, mate?
I would say in your next one-to-one with your direct reports, spend 5 to 10 minutes speaking about well-being.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Anouska?
Yeah, I would say again that effective communication is absolutely crucial. And yeah, as I was just saying, that in that one-to-one, you'll find that talking about well-being, talking about something that's not just work, will really help you build that rapport with that individual and support them to feel able to open up to you as well as a manager. And I think both parties will get a lot from that.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. Well, look, there's a common message there, isn't there? Well, it's about communication, isn't it? It's good to talk. I don't know. I'm the older generation, so I remember the advert that Bob Hoskins was in, the BT advert, where he said it's good to talk, and that's going to be true, isn't it? We are a race, a culture. We're a species that sits around campfires and we chat and we listen and we show emotional intelligence and we show a genuineness and an authenticity about the way we connect with people, and that's where our strength is. And yes, our manager roles might take on, different responsibilities, but we're still the same human being that's been on the planet for a long time. And in many respects, it's what our ancestors have given us to do, to sit down and show a genuineness to our fellow humans and to listen and to be open to move forward together. We're living proof that it works. Think about it. We've been on the planet for a couple of 100,000 years, and we've got a built-in resilience. So let's do the things that we know we do very well. Well, look, we've run out of time, unfortunately. So I'd like to thank you all for taking part today. I hope you find it useful. Thanks very much to our panelists, to Anouska and Vicky and Stephanie. It's been great to hear from you. We could listen all day and talk all day about these things, but I'm hoping that there is some things there that the audience can take away. Thank you very much for your questions. Don't forget to do all the things that we suggested at the beginning. There's some great things you can download, some great bits of information which will, reiterate what we've been talking about in a lot more detail. So do take those handouts. We do appreciate your feedback, so do give us that. We want to keep on evolving and moving and changing and adopting new ways of doing things within our organisation too. So your feedback is absolutely crucial. You know, we'll have information where you can give us that coming up on the screen as well. You will receive an email shortly from us with the recording and your CBD certificate as well, don't forget. If you'd like to speak to one of our health and wellbeing consultants about supporting wellbeing in your organisation, then please do talk to account managers. You know, if you have one, contact us, you know, and you'll see the details there otherwise if you don't. Thank you for listening in. Over to you. It's going to be what I call here a start, stop, continue. You need to do something different now as a result of listening in today, and I'm sure you've got a list of things that you can have a look at. My start, stop, continue is start doing some new things. There's always something new that we can do, but sometimes there's only 24 hours in a day, and you can't always do new things without sometimes stopping some old things. So stop some stuff that's sort of served its purpose now, things that don't work anymore. Make some room for your skills and your qualities as a good manager to communicate with your teams and move onwards and upwards. The continue, by the way, is if we just reminded you of good things that you're doing and that they work, continue to do them. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So look, thank you. It's been great to chat to you. I've enjoyed listening in today, and I hope you have too. So goodbye from the panel. It's been great to have you along. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you on the next one. So have a great day and go and embrace change and enjoy being a modern manager. Thanks for listening in.
Thank you.